welcome back to my channel, and it's been a long absence, I'm afraid. I was whisked off to hospital with a septic leg, and I was in for 2 months. But during that time I did keep in touch with my grandson Isaac. He was bringing me news of your comments on the Titan film, and I was very grateful for those. They cheered me up no end while I was in there. There's nothing much happening in a hospital bed. It's quite boring. Happily, I'm on the road to recovery, and exercises. I still do my exercises and walking around the locality. I even sat in the car the other day where they made the necessary noises of the engine running. And no, sorry.
No, that's good.
Beep beep. Well, anyway, the object is to be able to get out into Derbyshire, really, and particularly into the Via Gellia, and to climb up the steep sides of the Via Gellia to get to the Goodluck Mine, where I can be reunited with my friends from the Goodluck Mine Preservation Club, and feel the familiar setting of the underground world. Well, the film of the Goodluck Mine doesn't just cover the Goodluck Mine. That was a reason for doing it, and so that the people visiting the mine could have some of the background to take away with them. But it was about the Via Gellia and its importance to the mining community and to the prosperity of the area. I was ably assisted in the project by Martin Long and Richard Holford, who came along and helped with the film production, and fulfilled me with some of the details of what we're looking at. So as I say, I've got a lot to get well for, to be able to go back up there and revisit some of the places that we covered in the film. Goodluck Mine, incidentally, is one of the very few, or perhaps it's unique in the fact that it's not been reworked subsequent to the lead mining by fluorspar workers, who would generally tend to obliterate all the archaeology of the lead miners. So in that sense, that's why it's of particular importance, and there's quite a lot to see in the mine of the stempling and the way that mine was picked and so on, and some of the lead veins. It's well worth a visit, and I hope some of our enthusiasm comes across in the film. Furthermore, if you're interested in keeping up to date with what they're doing up there, and they're still pretty active, I've got an excellent Facebook page which you can have a look at and keep up to date. Well, I hope that I've made my peace with you for the long absence, which I apologise again. Maybe see you at the Via Gellia sometime. But without more ado, we'll roll the film, and I hope you enjoy it, and see you again soon. The Via Gellia has a very poor reputation for accidents, but in reality it's only part of a much longer road linking the Midlands with the Peak District for industry and tourism. It runs from the top left of this picture along a steep-sided wooded valley carved out of the limestone millions of years ago. The limestone contains mineral veins which have been exploited for lead over many centuries, perhaps since Roman times, but most of the mine workings and buildings have long since collapsed and returned to nature. But a few have survived, and one in particular has not only survived but is flourishing under the auspices of a dedicated bunch of enthusiasts. The mine is aptly named Goodluck, and this film is dedicated to their efforts. The story of Goodluck Mine started millions of years ago, when mineral-rich fluids entered the joints and cracks in the limestone, forming lead ore as it cooled. The area around Cromford, Middleton and Hopton, including the Via Gellia, retained workable deposits of this ore called galena, and its extraction resulted in a major transformation of the area. And the concentration of lead veins, shown as coloured lines on this old map, gives some idea of the potential for riches. I've just driven through Cromford and turned left into the Via Gellia onto the turnpike road to Hopton. Straight on leads to the mining village of Bonsall, and on the junction stood a pub called the Pig o' Lead, now a bed and breakfast. On the opposite corner, reflected in the mill pond, is the listed building that was once a corn mill. A very tranquil setting today, but nearly 2 centuries ago it was the site of a busy lead smelter owned by John Alsop, who we shall hear more of later. The road was constructed in the 1790s by Philip Gell of Hopton Hall, a local industrialist and mine owner whose interest in all things Roman led to its acquiring the Latin-sounding name of Via Gellia. The Gells also had an interest in a smelter once sited here on the left, run by a Thomas Saxelby. Later in the century, the site became a colour works. The road transported lead ore to the smelters and onwards to the canal link at Cromford. In the spring sunshine, the Via Gellia has been described as rich in light and colour and luminous shade. We can thank the tree planting work of successive generations for this, which has made good the destruction caused by mining, smelting, lime burning and quarrying. Rich meadows with a wide variety of wildflowers augment the beauty. This pretty little wildflower is a true survivor called leadworm. It's to be found on poor soil such as lead mine waste heaps and belongs to a specialised group called metallophytes. Twofer Cottage is coming up on the right and was around in 1892 as this old print shows. It was built of a rock called tufa, deposited from calcium-rich water was found nearby on the hillside at Dunsley Springs. This brief look at the Via Gellia ends at what will be our eventual destination, Goodluck Mine, with its very visible waste heap. It would doubtless be considered an eyesore if it were created today, but it's nevertheless a reminder of a past way of life, signs of which are disappearing at an alarming rate. We've looked at the commercial origins of the road and the picturesque route it's now become. Now a closer look at some of the mines that sprang up in the 18th and 19th centuries when lead was in great demand. This must have been a familiar sight 200 years ago when the old man, as we affectionately called old lead miners and their work, walked to the mines in all weathers and often great distances. They dressed in clothes that afforded little protection from the cold and damp below ground. We'll meet him again when we visit Goodluck Mine. Mines are plentiful in the limestone on both sides of the Via Gellia, but most were operated on a small scale by a few individuals, who toiled in the usually forlorn hope of striking a broad, rich seam of lead. The first of our visits is to a mine known today as Groning Tor Level, which lies beneath a limestone cliff of the same name. As with all of the mines we'll visit, the mineral or lead vein is followed by means of a horizontal passage called an adit. Groning Tor hides a fine example of a hand-picked coffin level, a passage usually at the height of a man, driven to shoulder width at the top and tapering to the bottom as with a coffin. The sweeping marks of the pick are clearly visible here, and as limestone is a very hard rock, the work must have been very arduous and slow, even with the help of blasting, and progress of 2 to 3 inches a shift was the norm. Mining methods suggest that it was driven during the latter part of the 18th century. One method of driving can clearly be seen here, where a deep, hand-picked central groove was first created, then the sides removed, probably by blasting, before finishing by hand. A very neat job. Where water is present in a mine and it hinders extraction, a drainage level similar to Groning Tor would be created. Such levels are often called soughs. Few mines in the Via Gellia are affected by water, and the small amount here drains away into a natural fissure and is not a problem, except when it mixes with clay material such as toadstone as here, when it can be a bit of a sticking point. Mines and caves provide a home for a variety of creatures which are well adapted to life underground. Close to the entrance, cave spiders guard their egg sacs, and further back where it's darker, 2 species of moth can be found that emerge only briefly so their caterpillars can feed on vegetation outside the mine. A swarm of little crane flies seems to have just hatched. All harmless to humans, but the flies will provide a good feast for bats and birds. Mounds of waste rock are a feature of a mining area, and the larger the heap, the deeper the mine. We've already seen the huge one at Goodluck Mine, and this one at Jacob's Dream Mine must be along the runners-up. This ruined building, a or miner's shelter, is unusual in that it survived almost intact for nearly 2 centuries. Trees are doing their best to reduce it to ground level, and urgent measures are needed before it's lost to nature altogether. Records show that the mine was acquired in 1807 and was driven with gunpowder to about 170 metres length. On the other side of the road, and familiar to regular users of the Via Gellia, is the large black opening of Bonsall Lees level. But few will have ventured beyond the threshold, discouraged perhaps by the presence of the ever-deepening water and the eerie sound effect. It was started around 1854 with the intention of intersecting deposits believed to exist at depth on the scale of those found at Goodluck and other mines opposite. The plan shows the ambitious scale of the project, and the red line the actual length achieved. Driving was abandoned at only 70 metres, and attention turned to a higher level at nearby Slaley Suff. A large influx of water issuing from a bedding plane was soon encountered, and is still very active today. It disappears at the entrance and emerges on the other side of the road. The size of the driving is unusual for this area, being over 2 metres high and 2 metres wide. Some names and dates are carved into the rock at the end. R. Grattan and M. Walker, and S. Burley and P. Sharrock, both dated 1915. Adventurers, perhaps still too young or even too old to be called up for the Great War. This display, with its lively waterfall and white calcite deposit, wouldn't look out of place in the garden of a stately home, but it's best left tucked away in the darkness for those who don't mind getting their feet wet. Crossing the footbridge over Middleton Brook brings us back to the south side again, and into the ore field where Goodluck Mine is located. We're also back on land in possession of the Gell family for hundreds of years, but in 1800 sold to Richard Arkwright. It's now owned by a key estate and protected as a site of special scientific interest. We're heading for Spencer's Level, not far from the base of the great waste heap of Goodluck Mine. It was worked for just 1 year, 1830, and may be associated with Henstocks Mine above it. A small rabbit hole entrance is partly collapsed and could be a tight fit for the larger explorer. The mine's only very short, less than 30 metres, and no mineral vein is visible. It may have been just an exploratory level. The level's often ignored by visitors looking for more excitement, but once inside the reason for our visit becomes clear. This remarkable lining of dressed limestone has stood for nearly 2 centuries and is a fine example of the old miner's craft. The roof is made of longer slabs keyed into the walls and locked together in the centre. Further in, there's evidence of percolating water which has decorated the walls with flowstone. It's possible there was even a small active stream here, as the rock shows signs of being eroded by water. A solitary female caddisfly is the only resident, and will stay until summer's over. The mine also serves as a winter store of hazelnuts. A dormouse or squirrel, perhaps? It's a tranquil but steep walk up through the woods of young hazel trees to the last of our visits to Via Gellia's smaller workings. The same path, which is popular with walkers, also leads to Goodluck Mine. In the spring, the floor of the woods covered in bluebells and occasional dark openings appear asking to be explored. But you never quite know what you'll meet just inside. A climb up the steep-sided tip brings us to the quaintly named Silver Eye Mine. We know from records that it was acquired by Caleb Hall in 1808, but little more is known of the history and productivity of it.
Is this Silver Eye, Rich?
Yeah, pretty close this. The entrance is on the Silver Eye mineral vein, and the workings are mostly narrow and in places follow the vein upwards, creating a tall section known as a stope. There's been a collapse here close to the entrance, and the lighting emphasises the fantastical shapes of the breakdown. An insignificant fairy blob in the roof turns out to be a late departing Dorbenton's bat. Good to know we're not alone. We'll hear more of Silver Eye when we visit the adjacent Goodluck Mine, the most extensive and best preserved of all the mines in the Via Gellia. Up to now we've explored the silent world of the long-abandoned mines. Now the sharp rattle of the ore tub breaks the silence, for this is a living mine.
I wish I'd have bought a tube for you now.
We're in the old co at Goodluck Mine, where 180 years ago miners dried out their wet clothes and chatted about the mine and their families. Today, members of the Goodluck Mine Preservation Club gather to talk about the day ahead. Of course, no ore is extracted, but there's plenty of work to do on such things as safety and maintenance, and most weekends this is a very busy site.
Black Gable.
Never start work on an empty stomach, which applies to both two- and four-legged members.
Even a little bit. You know how much this Mars bar cost me?
We'll return to the work of the club later, but members Richard and Martin, our guides in the Via Gellia, are taking us away from the warm fire to look for some of the older workings higher up on the hill, where the veins were first exploited in the late 18th century. This old OS map shows the line of old shafts running at an angle, lower right on the map. The atmospheric fog's not ideal for views over the valley, and we'll need to tread carefully since the original workings were all accessed by means of shafts driven down into the lead veins from the hillside. A rotting tree and crumbling coe may have borne witness to a fatal accident in 1783, the first time we hear of the mine. It's recorded that a miner called Gamaliel Hall fell down a shaft to his death, and that his heirs were charged for the cost of his woolen burial shroud. Not an auspicious start for a mine named Goodluck. Having exploited the lead in Goodluck vein above the barren layer of lower Matlock lava, they then decided to try to pick it up again below it. Then, in October 1830, records show that work began on driving a level, or adit, that should intersect this vein at right angles. This event is marked on the modern date stone over the mine entrance. The owner of the Goodluck title at that time was a John Alsop, a well-known and respected owner of mines and smelters at both Cromford and Lee.
Thank you guys for a great day. It's been really something.
In May 2010, a distant relative of his, Simon Alsop, made a sentimental journey from his home in Australia to Derbyshire and the mine of his forebears.
I'm Simon Alsop. My great-great-grandfather in the 1830s and 40s owned a mine over here, the Goodluck Mine. And He would have been at that stage a man in his prime. He was born in 1809 and he developed the mine to be a really good lead producer. And today I have just walked up a very steep and hilly, very narrow path to get to the mine. It was really something for me because I've had a stroke and my left side no longer works. It was quite a challenge, but I've done it.
How did you feel when you got in the mine?
Fantastic. To think that this was where my great-great-grandfather had actually been. He probably didn't work the mine himself, he was more a manager. And I felt a real high because it wasn't long ago I couldn't even walk. John Alsop, I should first of all say, emigrated to Adelaide and left Luke Alsop in charge. So the family emigrated to Adelaide and most of them are now Australians, of course. But this is where I consider my roots to be. John Alsop lived in Leigh and worked here in the mines. And one of them flooded and it ruined the family. The John Alsop Limited didn't survive because of the flooding of the Mandale mine. They put a lot of effort into dewatering the mine with big pump engines and it ruined them basically. So they immigrated to Australia. They left all the records behind. There was no room to take any records. What we did have was memories. And to see it here is just incredibly amazing. I'm
So
really,
it just
really
feels a
happy.
bit like coming home, does it?
It feels just like coming home.
Before driving actually got underway, a slight problem had to be resolved. The proposed route of the adit would mean intersecting a side vein from the adjacent Silver Eye mine owned by an Isaac Spencer. The outcome was that an agreement was reached, and in October 1830, Roger Knowles, John Alsop's agent, signed a document whereby Spencer agreed to pay 1/5 of the total cost of driving to this point, some 65 metres along the adit. Measurements in mining tended to be in fathoms, that's roughly 2 metres. Spencer's 1/5 share amounted to 55 fathoms, for which he paid £3,500 at today's values, a useful contribution to Alsop's profits. Today, the point where Spencer's vein was worked is used as an emergency escape route out to the surface 40 metres above us. The wooden ore chute here is a reconstruction, but similar structures would have been used to move material by gravity from workings above down to adit level. Once the mine has reached solid rock, rails will be installed to remove the increasing amounts of waste rock created from the blasting process. Pushing fully laden tubs was back-breaking work. No mechanisation then, only muscle power. You can see how the passage was driven by the remains of shot holes all around in walls and roof. Limestone is very hard rock, and as several shot holes had to be drilled and filled for each blasting session, it could take up to 2 days to be ready for firing. It's desperately slow work. Illumination was all by candlelight, and miners had to buy their own candles, which were attached with clay to a hardened felt hat called a bradder hat. The shot holes were usually drilled by 2 men, one holding and turning the drill or noga, and the other whacking it with a hammer.
The hole that we've just drilled is partly filled with black powder, otherwise known as gunpowder, and we tamp that in tight into the end of the hole with a wooden rammer, and then we get hold of a mixture of sand and clay, and we ram that into the hole. That is to hold the explosion in place, and then into that we fit a fuse which might be made out of straw or the quill of a goose feather. We light all these straw fuses and then beat a hasty retreat along the passageway.
Before reaching the mineral vein in Goodluck, a thick layer of volcanic clay was encountered. Since it was likely that better mineralisation would be found above it, they decided to drive a gentle incline to leave it well below. To keep costs and effort down, miners tended to remove just enough rock to allow for comfortable movement, with occasional widening to provide passing places. At the head of the incline is a modern winding wheel or stows, but a similar one would have existed to assist hauling the tubs while the mine was operational. This ancient method of hauling was recently revived by the preservation team to remove rocks from a shaft they wish to empty.
Does that feel heavy, this stone?
A drop of oil won't have missed by the sounds of it.
Oh, geez.
Did it keep it free? What,
Yeah,
Finally, 14 months after the adit was started, they struck the Goodluck vein. They'd driven 180 metres, mostly in solid rock, and it must have been quite a relief to be able at last to begin trading. The event was celebrated with a tableau of initials, picked out in a conveniently blank wall, of the great and good connected with Goodluck Mine, together with well-wishers with interest in other mines. Chiselled in the rock is the date of the breakthrough, December the 31st, 1831. RK is Roger Knowles, John Alsop's agent, depicted here as the Master. NG is Nathaniel Godby here, and CH Caleb Hall, a possible relative of Gamaliel Hall, who tragically fell to his death as mentioned earlier. Once the vein had been reached, extraction of ore was not only at adit level, but also above it, sometimes to a great height, and the term for this is stoping. The space where the ore had been extracted was filled with waste rock supported on stone blocks called stemples, angled to support the terrific weight directly above our heads. But regular inspections of the mine by a qualified mines inspector ensures that any movement is detected immediately. And after all, it's remained solid now for 180 years, so there's very little to fear. Looking up gives some idea of the depth of the backfill. The bits of wood are there to form a ladderway for the miners. If we could continue up to the surface, we'd emerge close to Mountain Cottage, which is built on top of a shaft and workings adjacent to Goodluck. Sewage from the cottage used to be directed into the shaft, and this unpleasantness could end up in Goodluck. Thankfully, the drains have now been upgraded. In 1918, D.H. Lawrence and his German wife Frieda moved from Cornwall to the cottage for a year to escape accusations of spying. Frieda was the niece of Baron von Richthofen, the famous Red Baron, which didn't exactly go down well with the locals either. There's well over a kilometre of passages in the mine, and we're now following a side vein called Little Gulf. In 1832 this intersected some very thin veins called scrins. The little specks of grey are tiny amounts of lead. Two of the scrins were named in honour of supporters of the Reform Act of that year, Earl Grey and King William IV. The Act was especially popular with the mine owners. The sound of running water must have been very welcome to the miners, since intersecting a spring could provide the means to wash the ore prior to removal, which meant less material to cart out. Judging from the amount of waste rock stacked here, there must have been quite a bit of activity. Miners were paid by results, and evidence of their accounting can be found in several places. The more usual way was to scratch a mark in the rock for each load removed, and these were called tallies. Scratches survive indefinitely, but clay tallies are easily brushed off, and few examples have survived. I'm following Richard via an arduous descent to see a recently discovered example in Goodluck. The tallies still bear the imprint of the miner's thumb.
12 little blobs of clay all in a line, which we're pretty sure is a tally. It was obviously the miner was sat at the bottom of the shaft counting the kibbles, you know, all the buckets of ore going up the shaft. And there's also a reservoir of clay, which is where he's had a big blob of clay slapped onto the wall, and you can still see his fingerprints in it where he's dragged the clay off to make the tallies.
So now we're going to try and get out.
So now we've got to try and get out, David, yes.
Mining in Goodluck continued on a small scale throughout the 19th century and briefly into the 20th, but the optimism of Alsop and his successors failed to be rewarded. The Doxey family is recorded as owners from 1874 to 1913, but the ends hardly justified the means. In 1952, following illegal mining and theft of ore, the entrance was blown up. Goodluck wasn't finished yet, though for nearly 20 years the attic was blocked with rubble and completely inaccessible. Then, in the early 70s, came renewed interest, and those wishing to rescue the old mine from oblivion included Ron Amner and Peter Naylor. I met Peter at his home overlooking the beautiful Cromford Meadows.
1971 or 2, I met a chap named Ron Amner,
Oh yes.
and he'd got his eye on the Goodluck Mine in the Via Gellia.
Right.
So I went along and had a look at it. It had had the entrance blown in the early 50s
By the landowner?
by the landowner because people were mining lead illegally. So we had a look at it, and I said, "Have you been inside?" He said, "I can only get inside by getting through the back door," but he said it's a unique mine. It hasn't been meddled with, it's not been spoiled by cavers or anything like that. So we had to go to the Barmote Court to get possession of it. Now, I knew nothing about Barmote Court at that time, but I read upon it and realised it was the old lead mining court dating, well, the earliest knowledge of it was 1281. That's a long time. And it is in fact now the oldest industrial court in the world.
To do just with lead mining laws or mining laws?
It's for Derbyshire. The laws are embodied in the 1852 Act of the Derbyshire Mineral Courts Act, which only applies to Derbyshire, which gives people the freedom to go and dig lead wherever they like, except certain restricted places like.
So we applied to the Barmote Court for permission to...
We had to go to Barmote Court, we had to take a dish of lead.
Oh.
We did the whole job properly.
Was that difficult to get, or presumably you didn't get it from the
Well,
mine?
we should have come from the mine, actually. We got it from the quarry.
Oh, I won't tell if you weren't.
No, I'm not saying any more on that one. But the whole thing went through and we became mine owners.
Right.
Overnight. And we worked extremely hard on that mine.
But the process by which you came to have the mine was called nicking, was it?
Nicking.
Yes.
Yes, well, what you did is there were two ways of obtaining a mine. If you determine that there is lead available on a new vein, you just dig a hole and you say, right, I found lead, I want to put a mine on it.
Right.
But this was an existing mine. So what you did, you used to nick the post of the gate with a knife,
Right.
and tell the barmaster, who was in charge of all this, that you'd nicked it once. And you put a notice up saying, this mine has been nicked, it will remain as it is for 2 weeks. If you have any objections, you've got to tell the barmaster. The 2 weeks went by and nothing happened, so we nicked it again, and another 2 weeks went by.
Physically putting a nick into...
Yeah, put a nick in with a knife.
Oh, right.
And then that's where you get the word nicking, meaning thieving.
Yeah, I see.
And we ended up with a title. Not been done in a long time, by the way. You know, the court really had something to do that day.
So having nicked it then, Peter, what was the next stage in the
Well,
process?
the thing is to improve the outside. I mean, the outside had been derelict for a long time, and the old buildings have been pushed over, and we cleaned it up, tidied it up, made it look habitable, if you like. Made sure the inside was secure, made sure we had an escape way through the top,
Right.
and bits like that, you know.
Was it a pretty hard job, wasn't it, I think? Well, you think it had been blown up, so you had quite a bit of rubble to remove.
Oh, huge amount of rubbish and rubble, yes.
Yes. So having got the entrance opened at long last and made safe, it was then was it then classed as a working mine?
It's classed as a working mine, yes.
So you had to have a mine manager and...
Yes, and we were inspected, and still are inspected by the Inspectorate for Mines.
All right.
And
it's fairly formal then.
They have the ability to close us down at a moment's notice.
What other problems did you encounter?
Well, the first major problem we had was that the mines inspector wanted a secondary escape.
Oh, right.
We were in the situation that had anything near the entrance collapsed, we had no way out. We'd have to wait for the NCB to turn up with a gang of lads to dig us out.
Dear.
So we did know that there was a cross vein called the Silver Eye vein,
Yes.
which had nothing to do with Goodluck, by the way. But we did notice on this vein there was a shaft off it. And we explored this and it went to what we call day.
Yes.
Came out of daylight. So we got lots of iron rungs and things like that, and a steel door with a lock on it, and we opened that up as an escape hatch. And what was interesting about this, I got into conversation once with an old man in Middleton by Wordsworth, who actually worked this mine in the Depression. He was courting this girl, and he went to this girl's father and said, "Can I have your daughter for my wife?"
Yes.
And he says, what do you do for a living? He said, "I'm on the dole." He said, "No, you're not. I've got a mine down there, go and work it." And he actually used that shaft to get to work instead of going down the hill and going in again.
So Ron was the main
he was, yes,
instigator
until a few years ago,
right.
when he gave it all up and he said, "I don't know how to do this and what to do." I said, "Well, and we're going to transfer the ownership into a gang of lads."
That's the Goodluck Mine Preservation Club.
Yeah.
That's probably a signal for us to stop. Anyway, Peter, thank you very much indeed for your time. Peter never lost interest in the mine, and in 2007 chaired the new group of caretakers called the Goodluck Mine Preservation Club. The mine's future looks secure once again. David Barry is its current secretary, and I caught up with him on his way to carry out safety work, having accumulated a fair amount of Derbyshire mud en route. I asked him how the club came into being.
We heard that Ron Amner, who was looking after the mine at the time, was planning on relinquishing the title, and the options were grim. It would have been closed, probably blasted in, and we felt it would be a tremendous loss to history and to cavers and mine explorers if that had happened.
It's a fairly typical small-scale mine then, this is, and why is it so important?
It's a unique combination of surface features with an original some buildings, and the adit, which we have a date for, and a known history of who was involved with it,
right.
Plus an enormous mass of accessible workings.
What obstacles did you have to overcome then before we could actually take it over and conserve it for future generations?
Well, a lot of the work was getting people together to agree to do this. There were concerns about health and safety, about how we would fund it, but we were very fortunate that we got a good group of people early. We managed to get some support from Puddens and other groups.
That's the Peak District Mines.
Sorry, the Peak District Mines Historical Society. So we got off to a good start. We sorted out insurance with the BCA. A lot of the really hard work had been done many years ago. So the first priority we had was to clear the surface of scrap metal and rubbish we had collected over the years, which had been held just in case it might be useful. But we were conscious it was a site of special scientific interest.
That's the land around here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we didn't want to fall foul of the landowners or any other interested groups. And that's something we tried to do throughout, is work with other interested parties, the landowner, the landowners at the back of here who we've spoken to and got approval to go onto their land.
What other sort of jobs have you had to do then to actually make the mine fit for people to come and look around? Because I understand it's a bit of a show mine, isn't it, in a sense?
We'll never have bulkhead light fittings and concrete parts, but by numbers now we have replaced one gate, we have replaced and had fabricated the lids to two of the shafts now on the surface, because one of the shafts to another mine now connects with this. We found a connection and opened it up. So we've done engineering works, we've done maintenance work, because although it's an 1830s mine and very stable, which is a testament to the working standards of the miners of the day, it does require some care. We've had to prop some areas, stabilise others. So that there is some maintenance work involved.
It's on a good sound footing now then for the future, is it?
Yeah, we've been lucky in getting groups of people nearly every working weekend that we've had.
And you've had financial assistance, I believe, from a grant, haven't you?
We've had 2 lots of money from the Peak District Mines Historical Society, and we were also very lucky to get £1,000 from the Toyota Charitable Trust, which helped purchase all the cap lamps that the visitors now use, and makes it so much easier to take the ordinary person underground.
So the future's looking bright now then, is it? The future of the mine and of the club?
Yeah, we've got a group of people now who work very well together. They've got skills which are very useful to what we do. We've got practical people. We've got plenty of projects to work at. And we're getting increasing interest from local people in their mining history.
And so you're getting plenty of visitors around?
Yeah, we're getting a constant stream of visitors, but they are people who are genuinely interested in mining history.
Brilliant. Well, I wish you all the best for the future, and thank you very much for that.
A pleasure.
David mentioned the mine's value, not only for its underground features, but also for its surface remains. Richard Halford, the club chairman, takes us round, and we start at the Coe, which is believed to date from the 1830s.
This is the Coe, or stead as they were sometimes known, or a miner's dry. This is where the miners would start their day. They'd come in here to get changed, they'd get out of their day clothes and put on their working clothes and boots and things like that. At the end of the day they'd come back, they would have nice dry clothes to go home in, because obviously in parts of the mine it is quite damp. Some of these coes would be over the top of a shaft. This would enable the miners to stay nice and dry while they were hauling ore or climbing up and down the shaft. There are many examples of it in Derbyshire, of course mainly in ruin now. We've got lots of stuff outside. It's a lot of the original, some's been reconstructed, but this will give you an idea of how a 19th century mine would have looked. What is reconstructed is done very accurately, and if you'd like to step outside now, we'll go and have a look at it. This is all the spoil heap. It contains probably around 40,000 tonnes of limestone and waste material which was fetched out of the mine. It was all fetched out by hand, pushed to the end of here on little tubs and tip. Gives you a fair idea of how much effort and work the miners put in to drive this adit into the hillside. Bear in mind this was done in 1830 and all by candlelight. What we've got here are 2 shafts. The smaller of the 2 is a climbing shaft, and if you were working on the mine from the top of the hill before 1830, that would be your way to work. Probably be fixed with wooden stemples or like the rungs of a ladder, and the miners would climb up and down that. The larger of the 2 shafts here is a winding shaft or engine shaft. It wouldn't necessarily have had a great machine like a Cornish beam engine or a Newcomen type engine, because the miners considered a stow, this set of windlass, as an engine, or some mines would use a horse. on what was known as a gin. This would be used for winding the ore out of the ground, and in some cases from many hundreds of feet deep. Once the ore was brought out of the mine, it would be tipped onto these stones here, which are known as a dressing floor. The ore then and the waste material would be separated by beating with hammers, flat hammers usually, called a bucker. Often this work was done by women. Once the ore was broken, it would be taken and put into the jigging machine, or jigging hutch. It would have been full to the top with water. The ore and the waste materials would be separated in here by filling this tray with the ore and the waste, and then the miner would work this lever up and down. So this box here would be going in and out of the water. The heavier lead, galena, would stay in the tray, and the lighter gang materials or waste materials would be suspended in the bottom. This is our powder house. It's built on a Cornish design. It's round, it has a light roof made of turf. They would never ever use slate or stone on the roof of a powder house in case it ever exploded. Obviously slate flying everywhere or stone flying everywhere would be very dangerous to the miners. The door faces out over the valley as well. That's for the same reason, it's away from the mine. Inside the powder house, it would be originally lined with timber on the floors and the walls. The timber would be held in place with either copper spikes or nails or wooden pegs. The reason for this being that the miners wore heavy wooden-soled boots or clogs which were shod with iron. This could cause a spark on the limestone floor with disastrous results. We're really not too sure about these buildings, what they were. We think possibly they were either ore steads, which would be a place to store the ore once it was brought out of the mine, or perhaps tool sheds. The one with the splendid brick floor could even be a co. Again, we're not sure. There may have been possibly a nice brick floor in the smaller of the two buildings, but we think those bricks were taken away and used elsewhere on the site because the miners were quite good at recycling in those days.
Following all the hard work in and around the mine over several years, some of the more adventurous felt that it was high time they had a bit of fun, which to cavers means exploration. The woods above the mine contain numerous abandoned workings, many of which are of archaeological significance. The small group takes advantage of a fine spring day to go exploring on the hillside above Goodluck, probing for shafts that may have potential as they go.
Yeah, it's like a shaft, this.
It's got sleepers on.
Yeah.
I've not seen this one before.
No, it's a new one.
That's interesting.
Is it? You see anything, John?
Yeah, it goes some way, I think.
Looks like
Yeah. Let's see what it's like down here. Yep. We'll have to shift some other sleepers as well.
it looks like
it goes.
Yeah.
A find is rigged, and Richard offers to go first, although I suspect he was none too keen.
I think I do now.
Did you call it the synagogue before you came?
So, Richard, can I just ask you, is this the sort of thing you look forward to going down on?
Not this one particularly.
No, you have done quite a lot of this sort of thing.
Quite a lot.
And survived, strangely.
Yeah.
Okay, from what you've seen of it, I mean, is it likely to be going very far? Can you see the...
It does look to go under.
Does it?
Yeah.
Good.
There's a short passage off at this level. Probably
No, it isn't a short passage, it's a long one. Whoever invented these bloody evil things.
Yeah, the devil's work.
They are the devil's work.
The passage proved to be featureless, and the awkward ladder climb dampened enthusiasm a bit. Further descents were left for another day. Better luck here on this 15-metre shaft has been a recent and exciting discovery. But before exploration got underway, a new steel lid was fitted to replace the old one, which was deemed unsafe. The walling you can see around the top of the shaft is called ginging, and the smaller stones can easily get dislodged. It was the camera that nearly got it. I was fortunately well out of the way.
This point here is where David Barry on the Sunday morning climbed up the little vertical shaft that I'd found, and really stole my thunder by taking a few boulders out and breaking through into JK mine.
Right, so that links the shaft you just come down
to the Goodluck
mine.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. This discovery makes for a very interesting and varied through trip, and takes in a very attractive section where water penetration has created some attractive calcite formations. Unfortunately, some floor features are already becoming damaged and mudded, but others, like this flowstone covered stemple, are safely out of reach.
It was when we were digging on it to change the direction from this way. Right on cue.
Mysterious rumblings from the depths.
And then it goes into solid.
This internal shaft is being emptied of miners' backfill in the hope that it'll give access to a series of workings beneath the known passages. Winding up the kibble is Paul Chandler, a founder member of the club and mine manager right through until quite recently, when he hung up his heart out, having completed 5 years in this responsible job. Apart from the sale of souvenirs and some donations, the club's dependent upon guided tours for financial support.
So when you get under it, you just see how
Richard's accompanying a small group of local people round the mine. Only a few of the points of interest will be shown, just to give a flavour of a normal visit.
when they got the ore out eventually, they would take it to the surface, and these are what's known as a bucking hammer, and that was to crush the ore and separate it.
Richard's dog Robbie is often on hand to help shepherd visitors should they stray from the flock.
Well, this is Silver Eye vein, and when Alsop got here, this is the first time he made any money. 180 feet above your heads with daylight. This is an ore chute, and the little tubs had come along on the rails, filled up out to the daylight.
Most of our old lead mines were subsequently mined for fluorspar, which destroyed most of the original character. Goodluck has fortunately survived virtually unaltered since the 19th century, and therefore offers a unique example of an original layout. Visitors can experience for themselves, in relative comfort, the difficult conditions in which their forebears worked.
This is what they came to find. This was the Goodluck vein. It runs right the way across, way down the passage.
What's in the vein? What sort of minerals in the vein?
Well, the creamy white stuff is barytes. They did actually mine barytes later on in the mine's history for a short time. But the silvery specks, that's the galena, and that's the lead. You can see they must have been very disappointed when they got here. There was very little left.
Is 1831 when it was first worked then?
No, 1831 was when they got to the Goodluck vein.
Oh, right.
They started that tunnel in 1830 and it took them 14 months to get to the Goodluck vein.
Oh, right, yeah.
They were working this vein from shafts from the surface. In fact, you can hear the water dripping further down, which is the Moore Jepson mine.
So when did they stop work in the mine?
In the 50s, 1950s.
Oh, so quite recent.
It was worked on and off till quite recent.
Oh, right.
The interesting bottle actually is the one that's broken. And we had a party come from Liverpool, from the Williamson Tunnels organisation, and one was a bottle collector. And he said, it's a shame that's broken because it's quite a valuable bottle. Well, it was. He said, but I can date it for you and tell you exactly what it is. And he said it's something about like Hooley's Elixir. I would imagine it was a morphine-based product, as most of those sort of things were in those days. And the date on is 1830, which is the date that the tunnel was driven. Yeah, so you can just imagine somebody probably had a bit too much the night before in bringing that into the mine with him. And
a bit like a modern day's Andrew's liver salt.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think probably. This is the interesting thing about this particular part of the mine. These are known as herringbone stemples. You see there's a keystone in them. The more weight that's put on that, the stronger it becomes. These are probably the best, some of the best examples in Derbyshire of it. Well, this is all the light that the miners would have had to work the mine by. Not very much, is it?
That'll explain why they were frightened of shadows and ghosties. They were very superstitious, weren't they?
Very much so.
This mine survived 6 generations, and with care and maintenance from the Goodluck Mine Preservation Club, it should survive at least another 6. By way of tribute to the old lead miner, or the old man as he is affectionately called, the club's revived a tradition of lighting a candle each Christmas Eve. We hope this custom also brings good fortune to the present day workers and their successors.
So what are we doing here on Christmas Eve, Richard?
We're maintaining a very old tradition, lighting a candle on the vein to bring us good luck next year. And it was for the old man to have his posset by.
Oh, what's posset by then?
Posset, it's I think it was warm milk, ale, and probably a few spices.
Oh, sounds nice, that.
Yeah.
I think we'll have to one of them ourselves at the end of the day, I think.
I think so, yeah.